Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 for Math 137. This week you've got 3 activities from the book, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. 2 of them are required, so I'm going to make videos for the 1.2 and 1.3, and then you'll find an answer key for 1.4 in the weekly notes. Okay, so again, you want to have this printed up so you're following along with me, filling it out, and then you're going to end up bringing it to the final exam in December. Okay, so last week we were talking about functions, so this week we're going to continue with that. So this activity talks about filling up your car with gas and what are the 2 input variables that determine the cost. Okay, so the 2 things, if you're going to the gas station to fill up, the 2 things that are going to determine how much you pay are 1, the cost per gallon, and the second one, the number of gallons that you purchase, that you buy. Alright, so right where we are right now, we can't really have 2 input variables because then we end up having a 3 variable equation. So number 2 says, okay, so now let's make one of those things a constant so we don't have to worry about it. So we're kind of taking out the number of gallons out of this equation, saying that's a steady 12.6. Okay, so now that our input variable is really just going to be our cost per gallon. Okay, that's what's going to vary. So we're going to fill in this table for different costs per gallon. So they're saying if it's $2 per gallon and we buy 12.6, you know, we figure that out. We come up with 25.20. I can't really fit in that little box, but I'm going to keep going. So the next would be 31.50 if I bought 12.6 gallons, 37.80, 44.10, and 50.40. Okay, so if I'm looking at the table, think about what you did last week on determining if it's a function. Is the cost of a fill-up a function of the price per gallon? When I look at that table, I see each input has one output, so I would say yes. Okay, each price per gallon, which is our input, has one output of cost of fill-up. I promise my handwriting is much better if you saw me in person writing on a board. Okay, so they want a verbal statement. So a verbal statement, we're just talking about write it out in words. Okay, so each time we would have a different price per gallon to find the cost of the fill-up. We would, the cost is equal to the price per gallon multiplied by that 12.6, how much we get. Okay, so now here we're going with a verbal rule, and then they want a actual like algebraic rule into an equation. Okay, so this one, you know, the cost would be 12.6 times that price per gallon. Okay, so right there is my input, and here's my output. Okay, so that's kind of our traditional way of writing it. And then eventually in this activity you're going to start to write it with function notation like you did last week, how you practiced that. Okay, so let me move this up a little bit. Okay, so then a lot of times if you look ahead on these activities, if you're doing one on your own, if you look ahead a couple steps, you can kind of see the answer for the question above. So here they have that rule that we just wrote. Okay. And so now they're just giving us, we can use this equation now for anything. Up above we had, I think, 5 different cost price per gallon, so now they're giving us another one. They're saying use the equation if P, the price per gallon now, is 3.60. Okay, so what we would end up getting out for that one is 45.36. Okay, so explain the steps we use. Well, really, we just multiplied 12.6 by the price per gallon. That's it. So now they're using the same, this rule right here that I'm circling, let me do it in red. This rule right here and this rule right here, these are exactly the same thing, just written differently. Okay, So that's in function notation. We would say that f of p equals 12.6 times p. Okay, so that shows p as the input. So then they show we get the exact same thing. So they're just different ways of writing the same thing. Okay, so now our next slide, showing us that the results, how else, when we're doing this, f of $3.60 equals $45.36. This is the same thing. Remember, this is our input, and this right there is our output. Okay, so it's the same thing as x and y. That's our x, that's our y. Same thing as input output. So we can write, really what we're doing is just generating ordered pairs. Okay, so using function notation, write the cost if the price is $2.85 per gallon. So let's use function notation first. So I'm first going to write it out. So they want f of 2.85. So that means we're going to take 12.6 times the 2.85. Okay, same thing we did before, and we're going to end up getting 35.91. Okay, so let me write this a couple different ways. I'm going to go over on this side because I ran out of room. So the ordered pair for that would be my input, which is my x, was 285, and my output is 35.91. So when we start to look at this on a graph, sorry that was so messy, that's just our ordered pairs. Okay, so write a sentence. This would mean, so we're putting it into verbal. We would say, if the cost per gallon is $2.85, total fill up will be $35.91. Okay, that's what they want when they, and we just wrote it as an ordered pair right up there, so that's the same thing. Oh, I just realized that was supposed to be a different number. They gave us a new one. So let me scratch that. Sorry about that. I just realized they gave us a new cost per gallon. Okay, so now if cost per gallon is $4.95, total cost then comes out to be $62.37. So that as an ordered pair would be 4.95 input, 62.37, that's my output. Alright, so I'm going to let you kind of read through this real numbers versus rational numbers versus irrational, talking about things that can be written as a fraction and things that can't. There's nothing really for me to fill in there, so if you have questions with that, let me know. And the reason they're doing that is to start talking about domain and range. Okay, so domain, so this directions, can any number be substituted for the input for cost of fill up? Okay, so technically yes, we could use any single number that we wanted, but not everything would make sense. Okay, so if P is cost per gallon, this varies, answers could vary on this, but we're going to say that the cost per gallon is usually, I mean right now it's usually probably between 3 and 5, but I know your textbook at this one point, they're going to use this number later on, is between 2 and 5. Okay, because that would be the cost per gallon. You're not usually going to, I've never seen it go above 5, and rarely are we going to see it go below 2. So that's kind of what are sensible values. So that's what we're calling our domain, the set of all inputs that you can plug in. So sometimes the domain and practical domain can be a little bit different. Talk about that in the next one. So determine the practical domain for that one. Okay, so that's what we were just saying. Practical domain would be between 2 and 5. Different than our next question. Our next question is determine the actual domain. Okay, so the actual domain is, given this equation right here, what are all the inputs you're able to? Let's say it had no context, it had nothing to do with cost per gallon. What are all the values you're allowed to plug into that? And this equation would work for any P. Okay, yes, when we put it in context of cost per gallon, it couldn't be any P, but the actual equation works for anything. So really our domain is what we call all real numbers. Okay, sometimes you see this abbreviation. Okay, that's all real numbers. Okay, so just a shorthand way of writing it. So likewise, range is the same thing. They're asking what's the practical range for this? Well, the practical range depended on what we use for the practical domain. If it was only 2 to 5 that we were using, that's where I got that number 2. Well, then my range is only going to be, whoops, my range is only going to be whatever it comes out when you plug in 2, which that value was 2520. And then if you plug in the 5, that was 63. So that's our practical range. Okay, but what is the actual range? I could get any number out of that. So we would say our actual range is all real numbers again. It's defined for every output. Okay, so there's a difference between practical and actual. Okay, so the next stuff here, I'm going to let you read through that. Okay, I'm going to switch. Okay, and this right here is just filling in what we had before. So these are the same values, just to save a little time, as what we had on page, that original one was page 11. Just filling in those same values. Okay. So what I really do want you to do this week is practice going on to the calculator. Okay, so look at number 10. It's got all the steps in there for your calculator. Okay, you get to this right here to be able to put that in. You go up to y equals, and it's on the top left of your calculator, of your graphing calculator. Okay, and this is under tables. Okay, so I want you to really go through these exercises on the calculator and get used to doing it. Okay. Okay, so let's look at this just one last problem. Okay, this comes back to the one we were doing in activity 1.1. Okay, so we're going to try to write an equation, and we'll write it in both function notation and regular. Okay, so this one was where you earn $9.50 per hour. Okay, so our total pay would be $9.50 per hour that I work. Okay, we already kind of answered this last time, so our independent is our H, which is hours, and our dependent, or yeah, that's how they're wording it, which is the same thing as our input and output. I'm just abbreviating. Is our G, our gross pay. Okay, so we'd already filled out this table, I think, last time, but for each one, you know, if I work 0 hours, that's how much I get paid. $47.50, $95. These boxes are a little too small when you're using a stylist. Okay, $190 and $237.50. Okay, so now we want to just rewrite it in terms of function notation. So same thing, they're telling us to use f of h. So after the equal sign is exactly the same thing. Okay, what's our practical domain? Well, they just told us that I'm working between 0 and 25 hours. So that's our practical domain. So practical domain is 0 to 25. And then practical range, well, if I work 0 hours, I get an output of 0. So that's my first practical range. If I work 25 hours, the max, I get paid $237.50. So that's my practical domain and range. Okay. If I evaluate f of 14, that means what happens when we'll write our sentence in a second. So let me just use the, I see I'm missing an H there, sorry about that. If I do 950 by 14, I end up making $133. So my sentence would be for 14 hours, you make $133. So an input of 14 yields an output of 133 on that one. So you're guys to take a look at these. They're a nice recap of the exercise, of the activity, and then take a look at the activities or the exercises at the end of it, because the answers are in the back for all of those. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions.